Hello, everyone. My name is Milani, and I am the Vice President and a proud member of Rays of Hope. Today is observed as Martin Luther King Day, and his birthday was this past Saturday, the 15th. We want to give honor to him on this day for his constant fight for the equality for the African American community. It was his dream to stop the spread of the infection that is racism. For hundreds of years, we have been searching for a cure and have not yet found it. As we take time to honor his legacy, let's do more than just reflect on his vision and the impact his life has had. Let us instead focus continuing the work he started so the dreams he spoke of that day can be fully realized. The poem titled This Virus, written by my fellow Rays of Hope member, Tyler Douglas, encompasses Martin Luther King's dream in highlighting the virus that has been affecting the Black community for hundreds of years. I would now like to present to you This Virus by Tyler Douglas.
There's been a pandemic globally that's not getting enough attention. Attention, everyone. This thing feeds on hatred. It hinders your happiness. It has a chain reaction on your body, starting with your heart. Travels to your brain, tearing you apart and apart, spreading around your body. This virus, it preys on the many victims that look like me. Breonna Taylor, Elijah McClain, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and many others, victims against this disease that lurks. And the disease can't sleep, can't walk, can't run, can't breathe, can't even take a knee for what you believe in. It's the same dang thing. You think it's fun? Seeing another brother or sister on TV being treated unjustly, Black man shot in front of his baby, unarmed Black man had a weapon, Black man resisting arrest, concrete to his chest, knees on his neck, I can't breathe, will stop resisting arrest. This needs to be addressed. Why do you fear me? What makes me intimidating? What makes 12-year-old Tamir Rice intimidating? How many more Emmett Tills before we can all say enough? It's the same dang thing. My blood boils seeing another Black dead victim of police brutality. My heart speeds up when I think that next it could be my family. My body starts sweating when I pray to God for another day. My head starts to throb when I see Black lives taken away. Bottom line, if you are silent, you are an ally of the virus. True that. You really are the super spreader. You coward, you're not strong enough to weather. You COVID co-conspirator. You too are a killer. You kill us with your silence. How are you going to pretend you don't see the violence? You are ride or die for a virus that robs and backstabs you. This virus is silent, and it will get to you too. This virus, it preys on the many victims that look like me. Breonna Taylor, Elijah McClain, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, say their names. Victims against this disease that lurks in the disease, can't sleep, can't walk, can't run, can't breathe, can't even take a knee for what you believe in. It's the same dang thing. This virus is passed on by carriers generation to generation, from pre-slavery to the Emancipation Proclamation, from Jim Crow to those that know 2020 and beyond. It's the same dang thing. It's the same dang game. When can it change? Nicola Marshall. We get so mad when we see that flag. 3 horizontal stripes of equal height alternating red and white with a blue square 2/3 the height with 13 5-pointed stars. You guys think you are the stars, dressed in gray, infecting others like SARS. My people are dying, suffering, and struggling, and this disease is savage, infecting and preying on victims that look like me. victims that had futures like me, victims that had dreams like me, victims whose lives are shattered all because of this disease. You get upset when we say Black Lives Matter, but we get upset because Black lives keep getting shattered. Thank you.
That was the poem titled This Virus, and it was written by the one and only Tyler Douglas. She is a sophomore at Freehold Township High School. And now, without further ado, Tyler Douglas.
Thank you, Milani, for that kind introduction. Good evening, everyone. I am Tyler Douglas. I am a sophomore at Freehold Township High School, where I am a part of the International Black Baccalaureate program. I have a twin sister and twin brothers. I am on the junior varsity basketball team and very involved in the varsity debate team. I am also a Girl Scout and the president of the teen group of the Jersey Shore chapter of Jack and Jill of America, Inc. I am an Inroads scholar, and some of my hobbies include writing poetry, drawing, community service, and cooking. I am very passionate about issues surrounding social injustice, and I aspire to be an attorney. And lastly, I am a proud member of Rays of Hope.
Well, Tyler, you've had amazing feedback on this poem. So what would you say motivated you to write it?
What drove me to write this was anger and frustration. So many of my peers heard about George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and Elijah McClain, and they had nothing to say about it, which completely baffled me because they're so quick to speak on celebrity drama, but when it's time to talk about social injustice, everyone is silent. So this poem was actually an assignment for English. So I asked myself, what a better way to express my feelings about the situation than to write a poem about it. So I did it.
And I definitely felt that anger and that frustration that you wanted to get out when you said, bottom line, if you are silent, you are an ally of the virus. True that. You are really the super spreader. You coward. You're not strong enough to weather. You COVID co-conspirator. You too are a killer. You kill us with your silence. How are you going to pretend you don't see the violence? I feel like those lines are just so strong in conveying what it's like to be a young Black teen, to see all of this happening, and the fear and the anger and the frustration and the entire concept of why is this happening. Tyler, what would you say the process was like to take these emotions that you were feeling and then get them out onto such poetic words in a page?
Honestly, it was very easy to come up with. The first part I came up with was, this virus, it preys on the many victims that look like me, Breonna Taylor, Elijah McClain, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and many others. And from there, it was kind of easy to build off of.
And then throughout the poem, you include words like pandemic and virus. And did you feel that those were important to include in relation to the COVID-19 pandemic, or were the two unrelated?
So I was laying in my bed, and all of a sudden I came up with this metaphor, and I was like, bingo. And I immediately started to write. I just thought that I can make this poem more relatable by being able to vividly describe racism and police brutality and comparing it to the COVID-19 virus. So in my poem, I don't say the virus is racism, but I show it. And I wrote this poem in the height of the Black Lives Matter movement and when COVID cases started to spike again. So similarly, both events divided the community, and I wanted to write a poem kind of saying and talking about police brutality, racism, and how that's kind of dividing our community right now.
I really enjoyed that, because I think that the connection between the two allows people who may not necessarily understand what it feels like to be a young Black teen to relate it to something that they do understand, and to relate it to something that they are personally going through and struggling with. You also state in the poem that it's the same dang game, when can it change? Are there any actions or events that you feel need to take place before the constant threat on young Black lives is lessened?
This because currently it takes a minimum of 2 years for someone to join the law enforcement. And this is someone who is expected to use a gun appropriately and use common sense when dealing with or interacting with people. People who justify putting knees on necks and mistake tasers for guns and constantly escalate situations end up with lives lost. And Rays of Hope, there was a discussion with the police chief, and he said that there is no training for interacting with someone with disabilities, and express his mindset that he is doing anything he can to get back to his family at all costs. And with this mindset, it can be very concerning as to how these police officers are handling these sensitive situations. I think that there needs to be an adjustment to the curriculum and training officers and the training that these officers get. It should be longer, and it should include social and communication skills. The officers just need to be educated about their racism and aware that they don't take it to their workspace at all. They need to be aware of the connotation they carry and aware of what other people think of them when they are in interactions, so these situations don't escalate and lives aren't lost.
I completely agree with that. I think that in the 2 years that they are in this law enforcement training process, you would think that they would learn to properly use and dispense their weaponry. And specifically referring back to the Dante Wright case with Officer Kim Potter, mistaking, her gun for her taser, you would think that in those 2 years of training, you would understand the difference between holding your gun and the weight of that with your taser. You would think that when you looked down and saw what weapon that you had just pulled out, that you would understand the difference, or when you put your finger on the trigger and fired the shot that killed Dante Wright, that you would understand the difference between those two weapons. So I think that there definitely needs to be a major change in the curriculum and what they are being taught, so that these things don't continue to happen over and over again. And speaking of that, on a day like today, focused around activism and a major civil rights activist and everything Martin Luther King has done for the civil rights movement, what do you think qualifies a person to be an activist?
To be a strong, effective leader or activist, you obviously have to be passionate about your cause and be able to express your voice. But what really makes an activist or leader really stand out is the ability to listen, receive, take in, and then respond. Even though it can be really hard when people are really against your existence, kind of what MLK did. He listened, and that really made the advancement of this movement so incredible. He was really able to get a lot done with the civil rights movement, and that is because of this ability to listen and to take in what the other side is saying to you, because communication isn't just a one-way street. It's a two-way street. And you have to be able to have these communications skills and have this ability so that we can have these discussions, these effective discussions, not just like pushing your side to the point where people don't even want to hear what you have to say. So having that ability really makes communicating very beneficial, and it really makes communicating a lot efficient.
I completely agree with that. I think that listening and taking in what other people have to say and then adding that to your work, or just accepting the fact and understanding the fact that there are other opinions out there and there are other people who may feel differently and who may not exactly agree with your opinion or your stance on a situation just in general. I think that really makes an activist, and how they choose to approach those things and how they react to different opinions. I think that can really show you, the depth of an activist and if they really care for their cause and getting the information out there. So speaking of today being Martin Luther King Day, one of my favorite speeches by Dr. Martin Luther King is actually Blueprint. And it speaks about knowing one's worth and how we should always feel that that we always have worth and that our lives hold a certain amount of significance. So when do you feel that a moment in your life that you felt fully seen, appreciated, and valued?
I can't think of a specific moment, but oftentimes when I am in discussions, especially in English or history class, people agree with what I'm saying, or when people want to listen to what I have to say, they say, wait, I want to hear what Tyler says, or sorry, Tyler, what were you saying? I really feel like my voice matters. And it took me a long time to realize that, because I don't know, I feel like when people just want to hear what I have to say, I feel like I'm heard. I feel like, people really care, and it just is really warm, heart melting, and I love it so much. So I guess in class, I do feel heard a lot.
I completely agree with that. I think that in today's society, young Black lives are so often what we say is so minimized, and I think that gets put down or pushed to the side a lot. So I feel like when we have those people that really genuinely care and want to listen to what we have to say and are intrigued and, like are really, really there for the conversation that we're having, I feel like for this, it's the same with me. It's very heartwarming, and it just makes me feel as if someone cares about what I have to say and what I have to speak about. Um, and on a day like today, how do you think platforms should be used to inspire change within aspiring activists and young volunteers? And by platforms, I mean social media platforms.
Yeah, so going back to hundreds and hundreds of years ago to present days, a lot of people have used propaganda and misinformation to spread false narratives and incorrect concepts. And people should be voicing their opinions to encourage others to voice their opinions and to be role models for future activists. Celebrities and role models are very important in today's society, and they should be voicing their opinions without the misinformation.
I completely agree with that. I think that there is a lot of misinformation that is always being spread through numerous different social media platforms among celebrities, politicians, just people with these large followings and social media platforms in general. I think that a lot of times that there is a lot of miscommunication and there's a lot of false information that gets put out. So I think that especially on a day like today, that these platforms need to be used to do good and to inspire good, to put the word out to inspire change within young youth instead of putting out things that are just that don't really hold any significance, I feel. So Tyler, that was my last question for you personally. So now I want to open the floor to all of you at home watching if you have any questions for Tyler that you would like to ask. And I'll give you guys a minute to put on those questions. So.
Oh, wait, okay.
I actually have a question from a member of Raise of Hope, Quintus. So what is your question?
All right, so my question is, do you consider yourself a poet? And so do you have more poems?
I would say I do consider myself a poet, even though I've only one poem. I do have many poems in the making, and I plan to write more poems. Definitely, most definitely.
Thank you for that question. And then another question that I have in the chat is from Ayana Doman. Why are you so passionate about justice and using your voice to educate?
I feel like since I was young, I always advocated for the underdog, and I always advocated for people who just didn't have justice and didn't have a voice. And I just felt like I was always about, yo, what is fair? I was always that type of person. So definitely learning about racism, learning about this injustice in the world just made me want to talk about it more, made me want to advocate for it more. And so that's just why I advocate for it now, because one, it affects me, it affects my family, it affects people I love, people I care about a lot. So, I mean, it's only right. I feel like it's my duty to advocate for it.
And I love that statement that you just said. It feels like it's your duty. I think that as young activists, it is our duty to, present these things and to make people aware of what's going on in our society today. And then another question that we have from Christy Joyner is, do you think that if the higher ups who are teaching in the police academy were people of color, would there be a difference in officers' sensitivity?
That is a good question. I'm gonna say not necessarily, because this is a systemic thing, and just because the officers are higher up officers are people of color doesn't mean that their mindset or how they teach or their regulations are like different in their workforce. So actually the Rays of Hope officer that we talked to was a Black officer, and it was kind of just like really interesting to see his point of view from that standpoint, and he was a Black officer, so I guess like not necessarily that's going to happen because this is a systemic issue.
And another question we have is, Tyler, how have you chosen to respond when others don't necessarily agree with your perspective?
That is a really good question. Usually I just listen to what they have to say, and then I would kind of just like ask questions like, why do you feel this way? What makes you feel this way? And then I'll be like, but don't you think that this is right? And then I'll kind of like reverse the roles. Like if you were in my position, how would you feel about this? And how would you go about this? So it's more of like, again, communication, not really just getting mad and angry. Like, even though that's the first thing you would think, like, how could you think that way? It's kind of more of like asking questions. Why do you think this way? I kind of just want to know, like, what makes you like feel like that's acceptable to think of. But yeah, so it's more like conversations that I have with people who don't really agree with my ideology.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think that a lot of times we can be very quick to just, let that anger out and just unleash it and kind of just get our point across to the other person. But I think that you need to be understanding. You need to understand where they're coming from. And I think for that to happen, for you to have a completely open mind about a subject or about whatever you're speaking about, I feel like you have to hear that other side and to take it in and to understand it. Even if you don't agree with it, you don't have to necessarily lash out with those, negative emotions and feelings. And Stefani, I know you had a question. I keep losing you. But if you want, you can put your question in the chat, and then I can read it aloud for you. But in the meantime, another question is, how has social media aided in your activism? And that question comes from our other Vice President of Rays of Hope, Sophia Lilly.
Social media has really helped me gain a voice, because when I was younger, I was really shy. Like, you could ask anyone. I was shy, timid. I did not want to talk to anybody. So having a social media platform kind of helped me gain my confidence, gain that, like, yeah, confidence. It helped me voice my opinions, my views on things. Like, on my stories, you will always see me posting something recent about Black Lives Matter, about anything really. Any IOI issue of importance that's important to me. So anything. But social media has really helped me a lot.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that although there are a lot of negative things that do come with social media, I think that one of the greatest things about it is that we now have the ability to voice our opinions to just a very wide range of people just all over. And I think that that's really cool. And Stefani, I know you have a question. I am accepting your request to join. So you just have to make sure you're hitting join on your screen. In the meantime, we have a question actually from our president of Raise of Hope, Jayla George. Is there any advice you can give other Black youth to write poems, especially about social justice?
That's a great question, President of Raise of Hope. I think that overall, you just need to write a poem. You just need to find words that really describe you, describe what you're trying to say, really flow with who you are as a person and the message that you're trying to put. I think that's just one of the biggest ones, biggest of advice I can give you.
I think that is really great. I think that's really good advice. Another question comes from KLG06. How do you feel speaking your mind in your school district?
I feel amazing about it, honestly. I feel like that was a bold step of me, which really got me out of my comfort zone. I actually performed it at a speech fire for extra credit. I got the extra credit, but it was just like, I don't know, I felt really, it was a girl boss moment for me. I felt very like empowered by myself and by the poems that I've watched prior to the assignment.
I think that's really, really great. I love those empowering moments when you feel like you're making a change or you're establishing some type of difference in your community and your society and what you're doing. I feel like that's kind of a big part of what activism is all about, is making that change and establishing it. So another question is, do you think that the torch of advocating for social justice has transitioned from the older to the younger, or is it something that everyone should uphold regardless of age?
Of course, I think everyone should uphold it, regardless of age, who you are. Everyone should be able to have a voice. Everyone should be able to express their ideas, express their ideology. It doesn't matter like who you are as a person. I think that the younger generation has done a good job of starting to advocate for themselves, because if you look at past years, it was usually the older generations advocating for this types of stuff. But now that you see a changed worldwide where it's younger people, and I just think that that's such a good thing to see, a good influence. I feel like that's just a good influence on the world. Just something good that's happened to society, and I love it. It's so inspiring to me.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think it is very inspiring when you see, I think when you get to meet up with and see, or just, go around these people who have the same goals and the same intentions as you and who want the same things that you do. I feel like it can be very inspiring and empowering, and it makes you feel like you have these other people who have your back. It makes you feel less alone. And I really love that feeling. And actually, another fellow member had a question. Her name is Stefani. You said it was an assignment. So how did your teachers and peers respond to your poem?
A lot of people were hyping me up after I read my poem in front of my class, online, of course. A lot of people texted me. They're like, "You go, Tyler. You did great." It made me tear up. And I was just like, why are you guys doing that? Like, it almost made me tear up that they were tearing up and that they were so moved by the poem. So, and my teacher also was like, "I'm so proud of you for this. It was really great." So I think I got a good response.
Well, I can say from firsthand experience that I completely agree with them. Like when I first heard it, I was just like, whoa. And I listened to it, I think 3 times again after that. So another question we have is, how difficult is it to stand for what you believe in a predominantly white circle?
I'm gonna say that for me, it wasn't that difficult because I'm around people like my friend group, is people who support me and I support them, and we all have the same passion for certain issues in the world. So because like I'm not with a friend group that is totally against my ideology, it wasn't that difficult for me because I'm supported by my family, I'm supported by my friends, I have such a big support group that it's like, even if I get one hate comment, which I haven't so far, but even if I did, I just wouldn't be affected by it because there's so much good, so much positive feedback that I got that one comment isn't gonna outweigh that so many good comments that I had.
Yeah, and then another question we have is from Diana Teresa. And she says, what are the best ways for a person to be an ally to the cause that does not directly affect them? And then a follow-up, what are some conversations that you believe are important to have?
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so the best way to be an ally is to be educated. That is the number one, in my opinion. Read about, read the news, read about social injustice, read about everything. Just get caught up with current events, and to educate others about the issue. A lot of people think that it's not their place to talk about these issues if you're not a person of color. However, it is very important to talk, even if you aren't a person of color. You have to talk about it, you have to educate others, and that is the best way you can be an ally, support us. It means a lot if you do.
Yeah, I think that that's a lot of what being an ally is about. It's not necessarily you know, having to go to these extreme lengths to do these things. I think it's a matter of just being educated. Because I feel a lot of times there is such a level of ignorance within other communities that just comes simply from not being educated on these things and not knowing these things, or from hearing these, you know, one-sided perspectives of what has happened. So I think that when you get educated and you learn all of the facts and then just reciprocate those to your family or circle of friends, the people that you know, I feel like that is the best way to honestly be an ally to the cause. And I currently do not see any more questions. So everyone out there, if you have any more questions, please put them in the chat now and I'll read them out loud for you. Another question from Katie Sten is, what are some policy changes you advocate for?
I advocate for, I guess, the police, policy change, decriminalization. That's a big one. I feel like I just did a debate about something related to it. So I think decriminalizing people for petty charges is just a big one. I can't really think of others right now, but those two are probably the main ones that I would advocate for.
So it looks as if we have no other questions. I would like to thank everyone for coming out to listen to this discussion. It is important that we continue to embrace the legacy left by Martin Luther King and his impact on our society today. You may have missed some important lines from Tyler's poem, so you can view her reading of it on a post on our page dating September 26, 2021. I would like to thank you, Tyler, for sharing your incredible poem with the world and for taking the time to discuss it with us today. Thank you so much for listening, everyone, and have a great evening.
Thank you, Milani. It means a lot.